Hello and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, please smash the subscribe button, and if you do find this video useful, please give it a thumbs up, even if it's just that you like my face. Someone has to. Anyway, I've got under 200 subscribers, so this video is in no way, shape nor form a paid promotion. This is literally my views and opinions onto the Keeway RKF 125, why I bought it, why I chose it, and basically what I think about it. So without further ado, let's get on with it. We're going to start off, and with the engine, it is a whopping 12.5 Shetland ponies at 9,500 RPM with 10 Newton meters of torque. So you're not exactly dropping panties quick, but at the same time as 125s go, that's not actually that bad. As for the engine itself, it's actually a single cylinder, single overhead cam, liquid cooled 6-speed transmission. So it's actually up there on the higher specs of the bike, really. There's a lot of bells and whistles on this bike as well. So for instance, you have combined braking system, which is actually now a Euro standard thing that they do. It's actually pretty good. When you hit the front brake, it'll do 70% of the front and then 30% of the rear, whether you're using or touching the rear brake at all. So it's a safety feature that, to be honest, isn't on bigger bikes, and the reason for that is actually quite intrusive. But unfortunately, if you're just starting out with riding and you're looking at a budget of one of these bikes, then basically you don't have an option, which is a little bit sad, but is what it is, isn't it? With the brakes, also, they're front and rear pedal discs, which again, really cool. There was a point where wavy disc was a really big thing, and this bike actually has it, and that is just standard as well. So the bike comes with upside down front forks, which for me, I'm a bit of a bike tart, and personally that is one of the clinchers for me. Now Kawasaki still aren't doing it, Suzuki still aren't doing it, and I'm wondering why the hell these Japanese brands aren't getting up to date and these Chinese bikes are actually pushing that out as standard on these bikes. So to be quite honest, that's 1-0 for China in my honest opinion. And whilst we're talking about the actual suspension, to be quite honest, it is a little bit soft, but it is a little bit plush, and it's quite a nice little cruising sort of setup. But at the same time, you do want to get aggressive with it, it is steady enough and sort of like sporty enough to actually take you through the corners and take you through the curves. So yeah, honestly, suspension setup on this bike is actually pretty good. The bike also features an LCD display. Now, that's actually not the greatest and most attractive looking one, but it's very simplistic and it does tick all the boxes. You have your engine temperature, your neutral light, and your gear indicator, and even a fuel gauge. So to be quite honest, it is backlit well, but it is a bit of a dull, boring square, almost like a Casio watch. If you know what kind of watches that I'm on about, it's almost a bit like that, but it's readable, it's user friendly, and it works. So yeah, you can't really grumble about that at all. And then talking about lighting systems and LCDs, you actually got a full LED all the way around the bike. The headlight really does have like an angelic glow standard, which is pretty cool. Actually, I have to admit, it does look really nice as it's going down the road. The indicators are super bright, which is brilliant, and the rear brake is actually shockingly bright as well. So it's got good visibility, especially at night time riding, and the headlight again is pretty decent at night. So that's a win for this bike as well. The seat height on the bike is actually at 81 centimeters. I am 5'7" and I fit this bike really perfectly. So I would suggest if you're actually taller, then it's possibly a thing where you might want to consider something else. There are taller riders riding these bikes, but personally at 5'7", I find that I fit this bike like a glove. It's not a very big bike, but it is definitely a very pretty bike, that's for sure. If you're under 5'2", you might need to either lower the bike or maybe consider getting something else with a smaller seat height, because it is still quite a relatively tall seat height for much shorter riders. So I'd probably advise maybe looking for something else if you are that kind of height. So whilst the bike is nice, it's still a little bit high. Now the bike isn't actually the lightest thing going either. It is 147 kilos wet with a 10-litre tank. So it's not super duper light, but at the same time, it's not the heaviest thing that is out there. Me personally, you don't really notice it. A lot of the weight is down low, so it's basically a low centre of gravity. It gives you great stability and also good handling on top of that as well. So I have to admit, it's not actually that heavy to manoeuvre around, and in comparison to bigger bikes, it's way lighter as well. So it's not a bad shout at all, actually. So the mirrors, they're okay. I wouldn't say they're amazing styling. However, I do find that you do kind of just see your elbows more than anything. There's a lot of moving about on the bike trying to get that view. That can get a little bit daunting, a little bit annoying. But again, mirrors for a bike, you can get a second set of like custom ones for quite cheap, in all fairness. As for the exhaust, no, it's not super duper loud. It's actually quite quiet, it doesn't really sound oomphy. You could upgrade it and stuff. I personally am not really a fan of loud pipes save lives, because honestly your fart cannon is pointing that way and the cars that you're trying to be so loud for are in front of you. So really all you're doing is just making a hell of a lot of noise when you pass somebody, but you're not really that loud to save your life, in all frankness. So the maintenance on this bike again is kind of what you'd expect out of a 125. If anything, it's probably a little bit cheaper than the Japanese brands, being the fact that it's Chinese. The fact that it is Chinese, don't just be fooled, because it has got ties in with Benelli, which actually brings it into the styling. If you really like the look of the KTM Dukes, well, if you get the old Duke and the new Duke and they were to have a baby, this will be the byproduct after MV Agusta touched it with an Italian little bit of a splash. It's drop dead gorgeous. It is a head turner, and honestly you could put it next to a KTM. It's not as refined, not as finished, and it is half the price tag at £2,600, what I believe I paid for it. It doesn't look out of place. You could turn up to a bike meet and no one would really say that it's an ugly bike or it's a Chinese heaper, you know, that bad stigma. Would I say it's good value for money? Honestly, yes. I mean, when you're looking at 125s, there are so many bikes on the market. A used Japanese or KTM or anything like that, they can still fetch for quite a bit of money. You can pick one of these up relatively cheap now in the second-hand market. You're looking between £1,400 to £1,800. Like this one in particular, I don't have many miles on it. It's practically still like new, but it's actually a decent little bike. Will it go down much further than that? I'm not overly sure, because to be quite honest, as I say, they're wanted bikes. They're a good option if you like the KTM and you like that kind of styling, or maybe you like the MT125. This is a viable option. It's just not the price of a used Japanese and whatnot. And also Chinese bikes have a bad stigma, but to be quite honest, I own 3 Chinese bikes and really the stigma is outdated notion, in my opinion, to be quite honest, and from my experiences myself. So I've said a lot of positive things about the bike, and honestly it is a very nice bike, but there are a couple of things that I would actually say that you might want to change. Now, me personally, I changed the handlebars, and the reason being is Chinese handlebars, they sort of tend to save a bit of money there. And I'll put the same handlebars that I have on my Sinus 125. If you haven't seen that, I've got a video up here, there, or somewhere. Basically, if you were to drop the bike, you'd bend the handlebar really, really easily. They're actually quite thin and flimsy. So I upgraded my handlebars, and they're a lot more solid and a lot more firm. Another one that I would change is the front sprocket, because the top speed of this bike is indicated 75 miles an hour, but being a Chinese bike, I will openly admit the speedos are never accurate. With the GPS, I actually found it was more like 65, and I was hitting the red line limiter. So the bike could still go if I just changed the front sprocket. So I would probably put one tooth up on the front sprocket so that you could actually hit about 75 in reality. So again, the bike still has some tunable capabilities as well. So that is one of the things I would also change. Now, the last thing I would actually change is the tyres. Honestly, Chinese bikes, they do have a bad stigma, but one of the things that I have to admit, and for me personally, with my 3 Chinese bikes, change the tyres. I still have the stock ones on here, but in the dry, they're brilliant. In the wet, they're pants. Absolutely rubbish. They're absolute, yeah. So if you do buy one of these, they're a lot cheaper than the Japanese bikes, but you could still upgrade this bike to be a potentially decent bike, and it will still come in at less of a budget than a used Japanese bike. So obviously these are a budget bike, and these bikes would probably suit someone who's more of a confident beginner. The reason being that I say a confident beginner is because if you're a right new beginner, if you are going to be manoeuvring a bike and you're not used to it, you're likely to drop it. Now, the one thing with very beautiful motorcycles is, whilst one, they're not particularly practical, that's definitely for certain, when you drop them, it gets expensive. The prettier and nicer looking bikes, yes, they fetch some money, but if you drop them, it's gonna cost you money. So honestly, this bike would really suit someone who's a bit of a competent and abled and confident rider to start off with. So that all being said and done, honestly, let's take it out for a spin. I'll show you what it's like on board the actual bike and my views and opinions of it whilst I'm riding it. You get to hear things like exhaust notes, see what it handles like, and obviously I'll do a little bit of nice running commentary. So let's go out on a ride. Right, so I haven't got much fuel in it because it is going up for sale pretty soon. However, first things first, ergonomics wise, you are leant over, so you literally have your bum right in the air, your knees are nice and tucked in, and yeah, I mean, it's agile, really flickable, really handles turning on a point. It's impressive, but effectively, yeah, you're quite in an aggressive stance, which is nice, but honestly, so it's got a little bit of grunt. One thing I probably would say is it's not very comfortable for too long of a journey. It's a great little commuter, it's good for blasting about, that is for sure, and that's the kind of starter bike that it is. And obviously the top speed of it is 75 mile an hour, or so it indicates, but it's actually more like 65. But you could change the front sprocket, which honestly is probably what I would advise. But as you can see, I'm in fourth gear, it's holding 30, it's not a problem, it's really stable, really agile. Like the indicators and all of that kind of stuff, like the brakes are really good, but the indicator and all your buttons, your dials and everything like that, all in the right places, all doing the right thing, very user friendly. But as you can see with the mirrors, they don't necessarily give me the greatest view of what's behind me, but overall suspension again really plush, and as I say, really light and flickable. It's definitely a pro for the bike. You could weave your way out of a problem pretty easily, and yeah, it's good, it really is quite good. Turning circles pretty good as well, so that's a nice little added bonus. It feels so light. I mean, maybe it's because I'm used to riding something a bit bigger and heavier with a hell of a lot more power, but even the levers are pretty good. Like, they don't feel cheap, nothing on it really feels cheap, tacky or nasty. It feels well planted, and your legs in the petrol tank is just, yeah, it's snug. You're snug and you can grip it really well, because you are leant very far forwards on this bike, so you do have a lot more of the weight to the front wheel. And away we go. So obviously my petrol light is on. I'm not super worried because this thing does a hell of a lot of miles for a little bit of petrol. But yeah, as I say, yeah, I mean, it's a great bike if you want to start off and learn on. It's definitely got the looks. It definitely feels a bit more like a bigger bike, other than the weight of it, because it's, even though it's heavy for a 125, in comparison to motorcycles, it's really quite light. But as I say, power wise, it's on the better end of the 125s. You're not going super duper quick, but you are having quite a lot of fun, and it is very smooth. It doesn't vibrate as much as what you'd kind of expect out of a single cylinder, so it's quite well balanced in all fairness. And as you can hear, it's not the loudest thing in the world, but you don't want a headache when you're riding, really, do you? So that's the main thing. So obviously, as you can see, it's a drop dead gorgeous bike. It really is a drop dead gorgeous bike. A lot of Italian styling just down here. This bit, honestly, I thought was a light when I first bought it, but turns out it's just a bit of plastic the way they've done it. But as I say, integrated vents and stuff, it's drop dead gorgeous. There's no other word for the bike, really. The exhaust pipe, as you can see, this is it, standard, it's stock. I probably would change it, but I'm just, it's a 125 really, isn't it? But as you can see here, for the combined braking system and telescopic front forks, yeah, in general, even then, how's it aged? Well, pretty well, to be fair. I did end up getting one little crack here, but again, not end of the world. And the only little downside that I found, which I ended up putting a bit of vinyl on, was here, because whenever I had things on my keys, it would just scuff all the paint there. So there are a little couple bits of bad traits, but in general, I mean, you're not going to be laughed at turning up to a bike meet on that, you know. It definitely turns a lot of heads, and a lot of people do actually wonder if it's even Chinese, you know. As I say, it's very much a cross between the old Duke and the new Duke, with a splash of Italian Benelli and Augusta styling. And yeah, I think they did a very good job of it, to be honest. Alright, back to the studio. So as you can see, it's actually a pretty decent bike, and for the market and being a budget bike, it's really worth the money. Honestly, you couldn't go wrong with getting one of these. Now, if you really like the kind of content that I've just done, then please smash the subscribe button, hit the notification bell if you can, and if you really did find this video useful, please hit the like button. It will really help the channel to grow. Obviously, I'm sub 200 subscribers, so any more subscriptions would be brilliant, and at the same time, I can guarantee you there is no paid promotion for my opinion. So, until next time, ride it out.